And this is something that you pointed out. It was not on my radar over the weekend. I tend to, crime, it's a love-hate relationship with crime. The more you read about it, the more depressing it is. But kudos to you, because actually, what you could say, it's almost like 2 weekends in a row now. We got good news, and this is an even larger cocaine bust happening on our shores with the aid of international partners worth over 234 million, I believe, TT dollars.
Kudos to the Toronto Police Service. I don't think, as pointed out before, it's always easy to highlight the negative, and I'm glad we're able to highlight the positive this morning. It is being said it's the largest drug bust in TNT. Notice they refrained from using the word history, at least based off of what I've read. But nevertheless, it's very good news, and I hope this continues. The thing is that you're cleaning up the streets of drugs because it is suggested it was on its way to the United States of America as the TPS was working with foreign agencies to deal with this particular drug hole. But if you're cleaning the drugs up the street, what is it going to lead to? Is it going to lead to further escalations in terms of war? Is the TPS prepared to deal with that? It's a whole other conversation to have. But overall, generally speaking, I will not take away the credit from the TPS in terms of their work and operations done. I can only hope, though, that though we were aided by foreign agencies, that we're continuing to work on our intelligence gathering here. And so we can raise the level of proactive measures to ensure that situations are prevented from happening. In this particular instance, yes, it seems to be the case.
The only risk, I think, would be potentially any reprisals against officers involved, right? Especially if this becomes more regular, then that becomes more and more of a concern. But as it stands right now, I mean, we're not even necessarily too sure who directly owned the cocaine, to say. If it was being, if this was just the waypoint to move up the islands, up the chain, up to North America, then it might not have necessarily have been under the direct ownership of anybody down here. So I'm not even sure if it'll have any immediate consequences down here for that sort of thing. The other thing with regards to this that, I mean, it is small, but notice usually when we see that drugs were interdicted or guns were interdicted, they get it at the port, they find it in a container, nobody's arrested. In this case, they actually managed to get it in transit on our shores, with suspects. So the potential of, okay, interrogating them and trying to find out more about the operation that they're a part of. Not that it's going to be easy and that they will automatically answer questions and give up all the information, but at least there's an arrest to go with it now. This is not just when you get interdictions of smuggling at the ports or whatever, one has to ask, is this, they're just throwing us a bone, some marijuana here, a few handguns there, right? We don't arrest anybody, so it's almost like if it's a decoy to let the bigger shipment go through. But one could argue this shipment is a bit too big to be much of a decoy looking to try to get something. If there's a bigger shipment going through at the same time,
well,
I'll be very surprised.
Us in our position, in our role, not make it a decoy. I think that there are still many questions, there are still many concerns, but generally speaking, I think any work on the part of the TTPS to try and, clean up acts of this sort, it should be given the credit, and we should give the TTPS our support in that regard. I mean, I still have my concerns. Don't get me wrong, I still have very many issues with respect to the TTPS, and as much as they're preaching to us about, well, we're doing this, we're doing that, and it's very difficult for us to actually, clean up all rogue officers or even bad officers, I still have my issues.
I believe there's a regional summit, and
yes,
that's one of the topics, bad officers.
Yes. So, going forward, I can only hope that this is just one step in the right direction, and I can only hope it leads to further operations in which we can clean up drugs, guns, ammunitions, and even take people off the streets. Look at, for example, look at the memorandum from TT Post circulating where you cannot wear or you should not wear certain numbers because they're affiliated with gangs. That's absolutely atrocious that you now have to tell your members of staff not to do that. Because what we're doing is that we're only giving power to the gangs. There have been signs posted, look, welcome to, I've seen it circulating on social media, welcome to this gang area with arrows pointed up. The thing is, if you have an understanding or there's enough intelligence to suggest these numbers are affiliated with the gangs or these are the areas where the gangs are. Again, am I stupid? Am I daft? I don't know if I am any of those things. Maybe you, the viewer, can point it out if that is the case. But imagine now in this day and age, the citizens and the man on the streets and the people working, actually being productive or even doing something good, now actually have to restrict themselves because of the possibility of being associated with a gang.
Therein lies the other, or the flip side to this. To what extent is this due to the help of international and regional partners? With that said, however, part of the issue is the amount of large amounts of cash that's coming in because of the drug trade. And that cash, of course, it makes it easier to not just encourage people to break the law, right, but also to buy corruption, wherever it may be, whoever it might be, right, whether it's a public official, a police officer, a judge, according to the Minister of National Security, etc., etc. And we would have to rely, because that part of the problem is beyond, the scope is probably too big for any one small island nation to deal with. So some people might say, hey, well, it was only because we got help. Well, with regards to drug smuggling at this scale, which is probably not meant to just sell within our borders, yeah, that was a given that we were going to need the help anyway. So at least we could hope that that part of the apparatus is working, because if it does, it could choke the money out of our criminal systems here internally.
I think we have, again, not taking away any credit to the TTPS and the work of foreign agencies, I firmly believe that it seems as though because of where we are and what we're seeing, I think we're actually allowing criminals to just continue living on with their lives and doing whatever they want to do. I think to a certain extent, we have given them that power. We have failed not only as a nation, because it's not only the TTPS to blame and those in authority. I mean, it's even within the household. You know that this is wrong. You know that this is illegal, right? 5 men robbed a Unipet gas station in Santa Cruz. Not one of them would say, listen, fellas, this is wrong. We shouldn't do this. No, nobody cares anymore. Nobody's actually doing their part or their job. And what has become of it is that we're just living in fear because of it. We've given criminals a certain power. And the TTPS, I don't think they're powerless, I don't think the TTPS is powerless. I think to a certain extent the TTPS, I think they just, to a certain degree in many instances, don't care. I get that impression based off of my experiences as well.
I'll say this. I think you're right. Again, I believe we took the excuse for granted. Oh, it's gangsters killing gangsters, when the murder rate started to climb. And now that I reached this point, one crime that I did take note of, the widow of somebody murdered 3 years before, she was murdered now in I believe a mini mart in Carenage.
It's a liquor mart, actually.
Or a liquor mart, yeah. Right? And it seemed as though, I don't necessarily know what a 69-year-old woman could be doing to get herself assassinated. So the brutality of the murder confuses me, and I am right there with you on both of your points. We took it for granted when we could have put a clamp on it, and now the Pandora's box is open. When I say way back when,
we are taking it for granted now, Sean.
And we're still, but my point is the foundation is it's difficult now to put the genie back in the bottle.
Put it this way.
When we've allowed it out. And that's the result. These sorts of murders are the results with regards to just the brutality of it. That doesn't make sense. And it's not the first time for the year we've had murders where we're left puzzled.
The Trans-Tobago Police Service, right? It's interesting how this conversation has evolved. We started off giving credit to the TPS, and now we're taking a look at their flaws, and that's absolutely fine. But I quicker see the police service at a crime scene, at a murder scene, after wrong has been committed, rather than police operations taking place to try and clean up the situation. There was a police fest last week it's in Dandan and Kelly Village, and I gave them applause. I said, "This is excellent, good work." This entire incident with train line and that area becoming such a criminal hotspot.
Yeah.
Even one incident that took place in Kirab, a coconut vendor was shot in broad daylight in Kirab on Saturday morning. Right outside
this is why I try not to follow the crime they made us on the weekend.
The point is, if it is the police service that are doing operations like what they did in Kelly Village, right, then I want to see more of that. Because I would want to see officers responding rather than just showing up to a crime scene. I rather that take place. I rather that happening.
Proactive.
Right. Because you're not going to clean up everything, and you're not going to clean it up overnight.
Well,
right. But the thing is, I am not necessarily seeing things being done as the TTPS has preached. And beyond that, we've heard the TTPS has the resources. I mean, people within the TTPS have said this. They have the resources. It's just the management of that resource.
All right,
those resources.
I do want to move on, but I'll just say, I don't think it's just the management of resources. I think it's similar to other areas of the public service. You might have so many officers on the books, but how many of them actually are willing to do the work? We know that there are at least a minority, maybe even a majority, that genuinely want to get the work done. But I'm pretty certain, this is just an assumption, folks, this is just speculation, but I'm pretty certain there's a few bad apples there that either they don't want to work or they're actively working against. But
and by the way, when the Minister of National Security said that criminals have friends everywhere, and he was specific in saying, he wasn't entirely wrong. Do you recall a couple of years ago when a minister was being sworn in at President's house? A certain individual stood up next to her. So no, the point is, listen, if you take one look at that as an example as to what is you don't know what's happening now in TNT? You really don't know what's happening now in TNT? I hope our memory is not short-sighted.
It's interesting the implications that politicians don't actually understand with their own words. They think they're just throwing barbs here at the side, but I mean, pot calling kettle black indirectly.